Have you ever heard of someone who disappeared only to return decades later without aging a single day? No, I'm not talking about a sci-fi movie. I'm talking about a man who baffled Soviet police, terrified psychologists, and maybe, just maybe, proved time travel could be real. His name was Sergei Ponomarenko. And this is not just some random urban legend. There are documents, photos, official KGB reports, and they all point to something so strange, so deeply unsettling, that to this day, no one has explained it properly. So buckle in, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you know about time. It started on an ordinary spring day in Kyiv, Ukraine, April 23rd, 2006. A young couple was out walking near a busy intersection in the city center. People rushed past. The air smelled of roasted sunflower seeds and hot asphalt. But then, the couple noticed something strange. A man was standing on the sidewalk, looking completely lost. Now, people being lost in Kyiv isn't weird. It's a big city. But this guy? He looked like he just stepped out of a 1950s black and white movie. Clean cut, slicked back hair, wide-legged trousers, a vintage leather jacket, and in his hands, a camera. An old one. Something you'd see in a museum. At first, the couple thought maybe he was an actor shooting a retro film, but something didn't add up. He kept looking around, confused, frightened, like the buildings didn't make sense to him, like the street signs were in a foreign language. And then, he stopped, looked straight at the couple, and asked a question that would start one of the strangest police investigations in Ukrainian history. What year is it? The young couple didn't know what to say. What year is it? It sounded like a joke, or a mental breakdown. They looked at each other, unsure whether to answer. But before they could respond, the man continued. Is this still Kyiv? What happened to the trams? The statue at Lenin Square? It's gone. What happened to the statue? The woman laughed nervously, trying to play along. It's 2006, she said. And right then, his expression changed completely. His face went pale, his hands trembled. He looked up at the sky like it had betrayed him. No, that's not possible. It was 1958. Just now, just before I took the photo. The man started panicking, clutching his old camera tighter. He stumbled into the street, almost getting hit by a car. A crowd gathered. Someone called the police. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Officers approached cautiously. The man wasn't aggressive, but clearly unstable. They asked for his name. He said, Sergei Ponomarenko. They asked for his ID. He handed them a yellowed Edict-style passport, issued in 1957. At the station, the officers were baffled. They contacted a local psychiatrist to evaluate Sergei. A few hours later, Dr. Pavel Kostin arrived. He was calm, middle-aged, and curious. Sergei sat across from him, hunched, nervous, camera still clutched in his hands. Tell me, Sergei, what's the last thing you remember? Sergei took a deep breath. He said, I was walking with my fiancée, Valentina. We were just outside my building. I saw something in the sky. A strange object, round, bright. I wanted to photograph it, so I pointed my camera. He stopped. Then, I don't remember anything until I found myself standing on that street today. Everything is different. The cars, the people, the buildings, everything is wrong. Now here's where it gets even weirder. Dr. Kostin, skeptical but professional, asked to see the camera. Sergei handed it over. It was a vintage Kyiv 19 model, mid-century, completely authentic. Still inside was a roll of undeveloped film. Kostin didn't waste time. He sent it to a local photography lab, under police supervision. Everyone expected the photos to be blank, damaged, or at best, some old buildings or family portraits. What came back stunned them all. There were 7 photographs. The first 6 were ordinary, street scenes, buildings, trees, but the seventh, it showed a flying disc in the sky, blurry, silver and glowing, exactly as Sergei had described. And here's the kicker. Experts confirmed the negatives were genuine, no signs of tampering. The chemicals used matched 1950s era film development, the paper, the ink, even the timestamp printed faintly on the edge, 1958. At this point, even the police weren't sure what they were dealing with. Was this some incredibly elaborate prank, a delusion, or something far more mysterious? But things were about to take an even darker turn, because Sergei Ponomarenko was about to disappear again. After the photo lab confirmed the film was real, the station went on lockdown. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a viral stunt. This was now being treated as a potential intelligence anomaly. The KGB was quietly notified, but back at the hospital, Dr. Kostin still had Sergei under psychiatric observation. He wasn't violent or unstable. In fact, he was shockingly calm for someone supposedly from the past. When asked about current events, the Soviet Union's collapse, the internet, cell phones, Sergei just blinked. The USSR collapsed. That's impossible. Khrushchev just gave a speech last month. My fiancé and I were planning our wedding. Kostin wrote everything down. He even recorded Sergei's sessions on tape. And here's something really important. Those tapes still exist. They've been verified by Ukrainian news outlets. Sergei's voice, his accent, his confusion. It's all on record. On the third day of his observation, Sergei seemed more relaxed. He ate normally, slept well, and even asked to walk around the hospital garden for some fresh air. Security agreed, and a nurse escorted him. He stepped outside, and was never seen again. Not by the guards, not by the nurses, not by the doctors, not by the police. Gone, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. The hospital launched an emergency search. Nearby streets, rooftops, alleyways. Nothing. No cameras caught his exit. No guards saw him leave the perimeter. It was like Sergei Ponomarenko had blinked out of existence again. Now here's where it gets even crazier. Months later, Dr. Kostin received an envelope. There was no return address. Inside was a photo. It was old, cracked at the corners, faded. It showed an elderly man standing beside a lake, wearing the same leather jacket, holding the same camera. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note. Sergei Ponomarenko, 2050. At this point, even the skeptics were speechless. Who sent the photo? Was it a joke? Or had Sergei somehow moved through time again forward, this time, and left a breadcrumb behind? But this wasn't the last they heard of Sergei, because the case would resurface again, years later, when someone made a chilling discovery in the city archive. It was 2013. A grad student named Mikhail, working at a university in Kyiv, was doing research on Cold War-era surveillance projects. He was combing through old KGB archives that had been recently declassified. Thousands of files, mostly boring stuff, agent rosters, equipment manuals, political transcripts. But then, one dusty brown folder caught his eye. The label said,
Subject: Ponomarenko, Sergei Viktorovich, case type, temporal displacement, date opened, 19...
Mikhail paused. Temporal displacement. Was this a joke? A misfile? He opened the folder. Inside were black and white photos of a younger Sergei, exactly as described in the 2006 police reports. There was a transcript of an interview, but this time it was dated 1960. In that transcript, Sergei claimed he had traveled to the future and back. He told Soviet agents that he had seen tall glass towers, flat boxes with moving images, and people speaking into tiny machines without wires. The agents labeled his case as delusional, but they kept him under observation. One line from the file stood out. Subject claims he was transported by light after photographing an unidentified flying object in the sky over Kyiv, 1958.
Wait, That matches the exact photo that was developed in 2006.
But here's the kicker. The file was marked closed in 1970. Why? Because according to the final report, Sergei Ponomarenko disappeared again. Hold on, let's break this down. In 1958, Sergei vanishes while photographing a UFO. He reappears in 2006, confused and unchanged, vanishes again from the hospital. But now we learn he had also appeared in 1960, gave a similar story, and vanished again 10 years later. Is this the same Sergei? Or is something looping this man across time? No one knows. But the next part of this story is what really haunts people. Because someone found Valentina, and she had something to say. For years, the case of Sergei Ponomarenko was treated like folklore, a weird mystery, buried in old tapes, archived reports, and conspiracy forums. But in 2019, a small independent documentary team decided to dig deeper. They'd heard rumors that Sergei's fiancée, Valentina, might still be alive. It sounded impossible, but they found her, an elderly woman, living quietly in a small apartment on the outskirts of Kyiv. She was 80 years old. Her name, Valentina Ponomarenko. Yes, she kept his last name. The filmmakers approached her cautiously. She was hesitant at first, but eventually she agreed to speak. The interview was recorded. The footage exists, and what she said shook everyone involved. She said, "Sergei and I were engaged in 1958. We were young. He had just bought a new camera and was obsessed with photography. That morning, he said he saw something in the sky. He wanted to take a picture, and then he left the apartment. He never came back." She filed a missing persons report, searched for years, but nothing. Then in the late 1970s, 2 decades later, she received a strange letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photograph, the same one shown to Dr. Kostin years later. Sergei standing by a lake, older, grayer, but still unmistakably him. Same camera, same jacket. On the back of that photo, the words, "I'm safe. I will come back to you when I can." She kept that photo for the rest of her life. The filmmakers asked her if she believed Sergei had traveled through time. She didn't blink. "I don't know what to believe, but he was always curious, always chasing the stars. Maybe the stars took him." And here's the part that gives people chills. The very last line of the interview, as the camera zoomed in on her wrinkled hands, holding that faded photograph, she whispered, "He promised he would come back, and I believe he still might."
Now, here's the thing. This isn't a story from some horror movie or made-up internet fiction. The case of Sergei Ponomarenko is documented. There are official reports, photos, tapes, and witness interviews that all exist. Some people say he was mentally ill. Some say he was part of a KGB experiment. Some say he got caught in something we don't yet understand. A rip in time, a distortion in reality. But no matter how you look at it,
Sergei Ponomarenko appeared in 2006 holding a camera from the 1950s and vanished again like he was never there. And the world hasn't seen him since. So, what really happened to Sergei Ponomarenko? Did he actually travel through time? Or was this some bizarre mix of mental illness, government cover-ups, and misinterpreted facts? Let's break down the main theories, and you decide what to believe. Theory 1, time travel is real, and Sergei slipped through. This is the most dramatic and for some, the most convincing. The idea here is that Sergei was exposed to something we don't fully understand. A wormhole, a ripple in space-time, a magnetic anomaly triggered by the unidentified flying object he tried to photograph. According to this theory, Sergei didn't imagine anything. The UFO was real, and somehow it sent him across decades, first forward, then back, then forward again. He was stuck in a loop, like a stone skipping across time. Supporters of this theory point to the authentic undeveloped film from the 1950s, the verified photograph of the flying disc, the 1960 KGB file describing future technology Sergei shouldn't have known about, the 2050 photo showing him much older but clearly alive. If this theory is true, Sergei might still be out there, in another year, another timeline, waiting for another ripple to bring him back. Theory 2. A top-secret Soviet experiment. Now here's the Cold War twist. Some believe Sergei was involved in military time manipulation experiments run by the Soviet Union, projects that were never made public. Things like quantum teleportation, chronospatial displacement, or time dilation research. In this theory, Sergei was a test subject, maybe willingly, maybe not. The experiment goes wrong. He disappears into the future, then reappears decades later, by accident, triggering panic among those who had buried the original project. That would explain why the KGB opened a temporal displacement file in 1960, why Sergei was treated seriously by Soviet doctors, why the story was quietly buried, and no follow-up ever went public. This theory says Sergei didn't just vanish, he was erased by people who didn't want the truth leaking out.
Theory 3. Delusion and coincidence.
Of course, not everyone believes the sci-fi. Some skeptics say Sergei was just mentally ill, that he believed he was from the 1950s, but had actually lived through the decades with undiagnosed schizophrenia or amnesia. Maybe he found or inherited the vintage camera. Maybe the photo was doctored by someone else. Maybe the 2050 note was a hoax or a prank. According to this theory, everything can be explained by
Mental illness.
staged photos, government records being misinterpreted. It's the most logical explanation, but the least satisfying, because it doesn't explain how Sergei matched the 1958 version of himself perfectly, or how he knew things that were documented decades earlier, or how he vanished without a trace. Twice. Theory 4. The simulation theory. And then there's the most mind-bending theory of all. What if reality itself is broken? The simulation theory suggests we're all living in a programmed universe, a simulation, and Sergei, he was a glitch, a bug in the code. He slipped between save files, waking up in a future version of the simulation before being patched and yanked back out. His memories, movements, and photographs were all artifacts left behind when the system tried to correct itself.
Think that sounds crazy?
Well, major scientists like Elon Musk and Nick Bostrom have seriously discussed the possibility that our universe might not be real, that reality is being rendered in real time, and sometimes errors happen. What if Sergei was one of them? So, what do you believe? Was Sergei Ponomarenko a time traveler,
A pawn in a forgotten experiment.
a mentally ill man lost in a sea of coincidences, or was he something else entirely? The only thing we know for sure is that one man stepped out of time and left behind a mystery that still haunts us to this day. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button so YouTube doesn't erase me from the timeline too.
And tell me in the comments, what do you think happened to Sergei?
Until next time, stay curious and keep watching us.